So when I first came into recovery as a creative person, my life changed massively. I was presented with a lot of gifts, and I was also presented with a lot of challenges. And the one challenge I want to talk about today is this feeling of loneliness that I experienced in early recovery, and that I know a lot of other creative people who are sober curious or curious about living without drink and drugs in their life, or those who struggle with the mental health, also experience this sense of loneliness and this sense of feeling outside of the norm. In my own experience, I really hate to label these things, but I think for the sake of these videos, it is quite important, and firstly, as a creative person, we are few and far between. I don't meet many creative people on my own adventures, I've lived all over the world and now I'm back at home, I'm in my hometown, and I don't meet many creative people, full stop, So firstly, we're a small bunch. And secondly, I don't meet many people who struggle with addiction either, And obviously, these days I'm connected to the addiction and recovery community, so I do have a lot of links to those places, and I'm also working full-time as an artist, so I have a lot of links to creative people. But I mean, in the general public, I don't meet creative people or people who struggle with addiction often. And so when I first got into recovery as a creative person in recovery, struggling with addiction, mental health, I did feel a bit like there weren't many other people out there like me. I've since come to learn that that's not the case, and I'm trying to do something about that as well by bringing us all together. But yeah, the isolation early on was really strange because, when I got clean, when I was clean and sober, I was living in a hostel in New Zealand in the middle of summer. It was March, and March over there is summer because it's in the southern hemisphere, and I was living in this hostel and there was just people everywhere, all of them partying most of the time. There was a pool, a sauna, a hot tub, and everyone was walking around in bikinis and little skimpy shorts and stuff like that. The guys all had the muscles out and all the beautiful women had their bodies out, and it was very much like being in some kind of TV series, or it felt that way when I was in active addiction. But when I came out of active addiction, I found like that, unfortunately, without the drink and drugs, I didn't have much in common with these people. Most of them anyway, and I found that in fact a lot of my quote-unquote friends that I had made over the years, when I got rid of the drink and when I got rid of the drugs, we had nothing in common, and that is something that I think shocks a lot of people when they make that decision to come into recovery, is that a lot of the people they thought were their friends, in fact weren't their friends. They were just more associates, drinking buddies, using partners, all that sort of stuff. In fact, yeah, there's loads of people that I used to use drugs with and party with and drink with, when I was at university or afterwards, when I lived in various places, and I hope they're doing well, but I have no idea what they're up to now, and that's because there wasn't much of a deepness to that relationship other than the drink and drugs. And so yeah, when we first come into early recovery, as creative people, we're going to lose a lot of people we think are our friends, and that's the truth. So moving on to like the impact that it had on me, yeah, I felt alone. I felt like I didn't know who my people were anymore. I felt like I'd lost a huge part of my identity because for the best part of 10 years, I'd been developing this identity that in order to be a successful creative person, I needed to be a successful drinker and a successful partier as well, And I've come to learn in recovery that neither of those things are true. In fact, those things were what was getting in the way of me becoming a successful creative person, which is kind of irritating to know, but hindsight is a beautiful thing, and it's important to talk about these things now because hopefully I can carry that message and help someone else who perhaps feels the same way. Feeling lonely did impact my creativity, for sure, but it also informed it in some ways, and this is always one of my suggestions to people who are new in recovery. If you are struggling with motivation and with inspiration, just lean into what is actually really going on for you, There's no need to search for some great topic to cover. You know, you don't have to find any great, strange meaning anywhere. Just look in the mirror and see what's going on for you, and translate that into drawings, into paintings, into music, into poetry, writing, movement and dance, whatever your chosen creative discipline is. There's a wealth of information within us, you know, about the human experience and what it means to be human, that we can tap into at any time. And so I wouldn't say it impacted my creativity too much, to be honest, because one of the things I did when I came into recovery early on was really lean into how I was feeling, you know. And even when I was in active addiction, a lot of my art that I made in my journals, sketchbooks, little paintings and drawings and poetry, they were specifically and quite explicitly about mental health, about addiction, about drinking, about partying, about the day after, about being hungover, about feeling different, about not fitting in, you know. And if at that moment in my life I'd been trying to write or make art about how good things were, it wouldn't have made any sense, you know. And so the impact that it had was positive, I would say. I went into it and I started to write a lot about what it felt like to be new in recovery, you know, about how my life was changing for the better, about how I had so much more money in my bank account and I wasn't doing anything different other than not spending it on cigarettes, drink and drugs. I wrote a lot about how I had more energy, how I was able to sleep better. I used to make cartoons and drawings about these things, you know, and so that loneliness in a strange way was provocative, you know, and it provoked me to make art about the new experiences of my life. And to finish up this video, I want to talk about the real remedy, you know, what I think is the real cure to loneliness. And it is as obvious as it sounds. It's connection, it's community. Those two things have been absolutely critical for me. As an artist, I think it's important to make the distinction between the alone time that we necessarily need to create and to receive ideas and to translate those ideas into, you know, really effective works of art, paintings in my case, or songs in other cases. We need that space away from society to think, to receive, to brainstorm, to formulate ideas, to craft. And so that privacy is incredibly important for me as an artist, and for other artists definitely, and musicians and creative people, it's incredibly important. But on the flip side, we need a sense of community. And I firmly believe that we all need a sense of community. We all need a sense of connection to ourselves, to other people like us, and also to something bigger than us as well, you know. And I still don't want to put a label on what that is for me, but at different times it's been the universe, it's been the creative muse, it's been other people in recovery, it's been some of my favourite artworks, I think, are a kind of operate in this higher dimension of being, you know. And I think for me it's those two things, connection and community, are so important. If you are new to recovery, you're an artist in recovery, a creative in recovery, the connection is just the key. It really is the key, you know. And I used to have this like massive shell on me, you know, impenetrable. Nobody could get through it. Or very few people got let in, you know, and even then I didn't tell them everything. But what coming into recovery as an artist has really taught me more than anything is that I need other people, you know. Sometimes I can't trust my own best thinking. And in fact, the first thought that I have most days is not always a good one, you know. And my own mind has got me into so much trouble over the years. And what I can do now as an artist in recovery is reach out to people and ask for opinions, you know, and ask for guidance and ask for counsel and help. And it's not to say that I have to take those, but the funny thing is, right, when you really start to get good community around you, when you really start to get good people around you who you can tell the truth to, who you know will tell the truth back to you and not just, you know, kiss your ass and not just tell you what you want to hear. The really great thing about that is that you start to fully appreciate what the best option for you to do is. And so to combat this loneliness, we need to have community. And a great example of that is in my own experience, right? If I'm having an issue with something, whether it's at work or, at home or with a friend or a family member, whatever it might be, I've got some problem, I'll ring somebody up, someone who I know I can trust, and they'll give me their opinion about the situation. I'll take it on board, then I'll process it. And if I'm still not sure, then I might ring somebody else. And then if I'm still not sure, I might ring somebody else. What happens more often than not is that by the third or the fourth phone call, if I even need to get to that point, I've heard the same thing 4 times. And so I know for a fact that the collective power of community is greater than my own thinking on certain situations. And actually it's a massive relief to not have to rely on our own thinking all the time, to be able to lean into other people and build community to combat loneliness is a massive thing. So I think I went off on a little tangent there. But anyway, that's how I feel about loneliness in early recovery. It can be isolating. Our identity and our art is often challenged, but there is a solution, and that solution lies in community, in connection, and in really speaking our minds to other people who trust us and who we trust in return. So yeah, if you've enjoyed that, let me know, leave me a comment. I've got my group on the go, Creating Sobriety, which, is off to a good start, and I hope to see you in a future video. Thank you.